Hi, I'm Tracey Hanbury. Welcome to episode 2 of UK Property News. This week, our host, Ian Collins, will be interviewing Marie Parris from George Ellis Property Services and also Suzanne Smith from the Independent Landlords. Ian will be talking to both Marie and Suzanne. They'll be answering questions that have been sent in from our viewers and subscribers on the latest on the Renters' Rights Bill. There is an awful lot of questions around the Renters' Rights Bill, and we've asked you guys what you need answers to. So I'm going to hand you over to now our host, Ian Collins. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you, Tracey. Let's meet our first guest on this episode, Suzanne Smith. Used to be a lawyer. But now you're a landlord, lawyer to landlord, and what kind of crazy journey is that? What's going on? I mean, all the stability is in the world of a lawyer, isn't it? And the world of the landlord, as we're going to find out in this episode, is a bit trickier.
Yes, some people might say I'm a recovering lawyer, but I love being a landlord actually, and you don't hear many people saying that at the moment.
Yeah, it's a tricky time. I mean, one of the things we wanted to talk about naturally is obviously the Renters' Rights Bill. It's front and centre of everything. You were saying to us just before we came on air, look, we've got to move forward with this because, it's there, it's happening, it's not going to change, it's not going to go away. We have to deal with it. I mean, it's worth just asking you then to start with the most obvious question. How does this affect landlords, say, on a day-to-day basis? There's lots of specifics about EPC ratings and pets and goodness knows what else. Day-to-day, the average landlord, how are they affected by this?
I'm probably going to be a bit controversial in saying this, but I think for the average landlord who has single lets, probably won't see a huge amount of difference, because if you've got long-term tenants, you look after your properties well anyway, and I already accept pets. There's going to be a bit more bureaucracy and it's going to be a little bit more complicated to put up rent. But when you step back from all the noise, most landlords don't actually serve a Section 21 notice. Mm-hmm. Most landlords have good tenants. Most tenants pay their rent on time. And it seems to be that the bad landlords and the bad tenants get all the publicity.
Well, I was going to say that's the bit that's kind of got lost, I think, in the story, hasn't it? And politically, as well as through the media, that actually this is an industry that rubs along really well. It's a crucial part of the kind of infrastructure of housing, the private rented sector. Most people get on with their tenants. They're reliable. Most landlords are clean and honest and all the rest of it. There's all these stereotypes that are out there, but it doesn't apply to most.
Yeah, and I just try and take notice of that. Yeah. And I concentrate on what I can control, which is how I look after my properties and how I look after the people who live in there. It's their homes and they're long-term tenants. And I've never had rent arrears, not even one day rent arrears. And I don't have any problems. I mean, the problems that come up are, the chimney needs repointing or the oven stops working or that sort of thing. But it's
when the oven needs repointing that's the problem.
Yeah. Mind you, I'm close to that. I've actually learned how to tile. And last year I tiled a whole kitchen myself. And because it was just a lot easier than getting in a trade.
This sounds like a bit of you, Suzanne, to be honest, because we were talking before we started recording this, that when you went into this industry, it was kind of like, I'm going to give this a go, see how it goes. It turns out you quite liked it. You got very good at it. You've got a big social media presence. We'll come to questions that have come in from a lot of your followers as well. But you've sort of found your way into this whole new world. You were back in the old corporate world of legal, which I'm sure was fascinating, but at times probably you thought, I'm cut out to do something else. And now you've discovered a whole different skill set. So it's not just renting out houses, it's tiling them as well.
Yeah, it's been liberating because when you work for big organisations in corporate, you're on a kind of a hamster wheel and it's long hours, very stressful. Yeah. And then I stopped it all and it took a couple of years for me to figure out what I wanted to do next. And just little by little, I went onto Instagram and then I found Canva and then I started doing reels and things like that. And then it just opened a whole new world to me, and I got people asking me questions, and because I'm a lawyer I can't help but give advice, and so out of that my blog grew, The Independent Landlord, and I now have 8,000 subscribers to my weekly newsletter.
Wow.
And I decided to do it differently, and actually a bit like the National Landlord Investment Show, is to keep it free. And there's no catches. I don't sell courses or anything like that. It is free, reliable content to help landlords, because we're going through so much difficulty at the moment, and just by giving lots of practical advice.
You asked your followers if there were questions that they would want to put to you. I mean, there were so many that came through. We were only looking for a couple. And, you know, Suzanne has such a wide range of people that do follow you and are really interested in your journey and how you deal with this industry. Let's go through a couple of them here. Here's one. When are we going to get the actual clarity on what's in the bill and what isn't? It's hard to plan when the goalposts keep changing. I mean, that really is a fair question, isn't it? Because of course this started under the Tories. Michael Gove was the man that was selling all of this, and he had some big ideas, and some of them went by the wayside. Angela Rayner is now in the hot seat. Some of those ideas are still there, but there are new ones. Yeah,
and this was a question. I know the person who asked this, and I've known her a long time, and she has quite a big portfolio up in South Shields. So it's going to be a little while before we know exactly, and there's a lot of noise at the moment because the Renters' Rights Bill is still going through Parliament. There are a load of amendments that were filed a couple of weeks ago, but they haven't been debated yet, and there's been a lot of excitement about, you know, whether it's going to get better or worse for landlords. But when it comes down to it, this is a manifesto bill, which means the government can push it through if they want to. And in terms of when are we going to get clarity, well, we still don't have the Act of Parliament yet, and it's been quite relatively slower than we all thought going through. So I would guess, I can't see it getting royal assent before July, July, and then coming into force a couple of months to 6 months after that, because even when we get royal assent, there's still a lot of detail and the regulations that have got to come out. So it's like we're at peak confusion at the moment, because we don't know a lot of what's going to happen. We know the broad things, and we should start getting ready for those.
But if you've got a house at the moment, and as you know better than most, most landlords only own one or two homes, sometimes inherited, decided to start it almost accidentally as a business. And then realise that, okay, they've got a tenant in there, everybody's very happy, their EPC rating isn't the one it's meant to be. Does that mean they've got 8 weeks to try and, rectify that? Or would there be a timescale, do you think, on this bill that would allow people to, at the very least, be part of a longer process that allows them to tick all the boxes?
Well, we've got a couple of things here. So there's the EPC rules that are going to be changing in a few years' time. That's separate from the Renters' Rights Bill.
Yeah, but it's all within this is the big reminder, isn't it? You might have till 2030 or whatever.
2028,
But that comes around pretty darn quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think with the Renters' Rights Bill, what will happen on the stroke of midnight is that all fixed-term tenancies will become periodic. And then on that date, there's going to be new processes for increasing rents where you're only going to be able to use Section 13, and tenants can leave when they like with 2 months' notice, and there's not that certainty of the fixed term, and that we're going to have to join things like the Ombudsman and the database and other things like that. Sure. So it's not a huge amount of things that are going to change apart from that structure of the tenancy not having the fixed terms. I think the database and the Ombudsman will come a little bit later.
Got it. Here's another question. When will landlords be able to turn down requests from tenants to keep pets? Is that all part of it? Because that is another issue. You said you've always allowed people to have pets.
Yeah, well, actually, not always allowed. I used to say no, but my adult children convinced me it's the right thing to allow people to keep pets.
Depends on the pet, right?
But and that's exactly right. So there will be some reasons why people can turn down pets. So if there's like too many pets for the property, if, say, the landlord has allergies, if it's an HMO, if the lease agreement says you can't have them, or the freeholder won't allow it for flats. So I think it's just really a common sense view.
Have you ever met a reptile owner? They're a very specific kind of person, Suzanne. And, they're very kind to their animals, but they are a specific, obvious cohort of animal. Your lizards and all manner of other strange, slimy stuff. Not sure you want those in your house.
Well, I've had hamsters in my rental properties, dogs and cats.
Right, you get away with hamsters. How do you think we will look back at the RRB in, say, 2 to 3 years' time? So much chatter, but what really matters is the medium to long term. And as we said at the beginning, it's happening anyway. It's a good question from one of your followers. Looking back on it, would it be like it never happened, or that was rather easy, or will landlords be thinking, God, this is a pain?
I mean, I think it's another milestone into becoming more professional in approach for landlords. We can't wing it anymore because there are going to be so many different things that are going to be regulated, and things that we're going to have to join and processes we need to follow. But I think stepping back from it, people may wonder what the fuss was about, apart from just having a load of bureaucratic hurdles to jump through. I don't think that the Renters' Rights Bill changes the fundamentals of being a landlord. There are other things that do, like Section 24, the change in taxation, and even EPCs. It will be more difficult to evict tenants, but most landlords don't evict tenants anyway. So, and of course, there's a big exception for this. It's going to be very different for student HMO landlords and HMO landlords. I think they will find it a lot harder. Up until now, I've just been speaking.
Very specific rules around that area, aren't
there? And because student landlords aren't going to be able to have the fixed terms for academic years, and there'll be more turnover over in HMOs.
Okay. Couple of quick ones then, just to finish on. What can we do to prepare? It's not the end of the world. Sounds like that, doesn't it, in that question? What do we do to prepare? I mean, is it just a case of reading up and getting your ducks in a row?
Yeah, well, first...
I know it sounds obvious advice. But
but it's absolutely right. And, I've done a free course on YouTube that explains all the Renters' Rights Bill. Just search for the Independent Landlord. But in terms of how to prepare, if you have letting agents that manage your properties, go on an inspection, have a look at it to see is it in good condition, because the rules for the Decent Home Standard will be coming through. Double down on tenant selection. Be really, really careful about taking on tenants. Get rent guarantee insurance if you're not sure. And another thing that's really important is communication, because if you have tenants already, they're not going to understand all the ins and outs of the Renters' Rights Bill. They might be on a fixed term and they're going to have to move on to a new contract. So just communication and just try and keep up to date with all the detail that's happening.
And just a very final one. A few people ask this question, actually. Should landlords sell up? Are you selling up, Suzanne?
No, I am not selling up because...
so that's quite encouraging, because you're a respected face and name in the industry.
No, I'm not selling up because I don't think that the bill actually changes the economics for me. Sure, there's going to be things that are more difficult to do, like the whole thing about taking rent in advance, but these are just details, and once we get our heads around them, they'll be okay. And I think that from an economics point of view, a business point of view, Section 24, the tax has had more of an impact, and interest rates. And I don't think there's anything wrong with landlords having a look at their portfolio and thinking, do any of them, do the numbers stack up on all of them? Should I sell one of them? I sold one of mine 3 years ago because it just wasn't making enough money, and I sold it and bought a nice terrace house and made so instead. So I wasn't leaving as a landlord. So I think there's nothing wrong with having a look at our portfolios to see whether we do want to sell anything. But in terms of, people still need homes, and even though there's going to be a big house building apparently and more social housing in the interim, where are people going to live? And so I'm not selling up, and I'm still fairly optimistic.
I think you're the most positive person I've met in years, which is fantastic. Suzanne, good to see you.
Thank you.
Suzanne Smith with us on the programme.
The National Landlord Investment Show is the UK's #1 property and investment exhibition. By hosting events all over the country, we allow you to network, learn and invest.
Now, our next guest is Marie Parris. Marie is MD and founder of George Ellis Property Services. Good to see you again.
Nice to see you always, Ian.
You look like somebody who's like pent up with opinions and stuff and renters' rights bill and all that goes with it. And we were previously talking to Suzanne Smith, and you know she's very positive about things. You're positive, but your brain is telling you, you know, we're not anywhere near completion of this thing yet.
I think, look, it is a bill at the moment.
Yep.
It's not an act. We do need to have the meat on the bones to know exactly where we're going, but we know which direction we're going. And we've got to face it. It hasn't been something that is going to be good for landlords. They're going to need to change some things.
What about that point of, look, you know, laws and rules change all the time. So,
Indeed.
And again, we were talking about this previously. A few years down the line, people would have forgotten it, moved on, got used to new regs, new rules, and just adapting. Is that fair?
I think that's really fair. You know, as a landlord community, we are a resilient bunch. I mean, you know, we've survived the Housing Act 2004, deposits 2007, the Deregulation Act 2015, Immigration 2014, Tenants Act fee ban 2019.
Battle of Hastings 1066. I mean, it was all there.
You were born then. But what I'm trying to say, you get the gist. I mean, look, we have survived. We are resilient, but this law is very, very different. There's a lot of things contained within it that is going to change the landscape of how we do private rented in the UK.
There's no doubt it's a game changer, right? We can all agree on that.
Absolutely.
We asked for a lot of questions. We got a lot of questions, as we always do. Let's start with this one. I'm panicking about these new laws. Can someone give me some practical, worthwhile information on what I should be doing? I have 5 buy-to-lets and 2 I self-manage.
Okay. I'm going to bring it back a little bit further, because I think every landlord is an individual. And the first thing that I would say to any of my landlords that I'm managing their portfolios for is create a spreadsheet, put some details down on paper. The things that I want is address of the property, who is your lender, what rate are you paying, how much have you got borrowed, so you know how much you've got geared, when did you buy it, how much did you buy it for? Because if you have to sell it, at least you can have a rough idea how much the capital gains tax is going to be. Has it all got all of your compliance? You know, your CP12, your licensing, you've done the right to rent, the electrical and everything else, okay? Once you have that information, and obviously the rent that you are getting at the moment, once you have that information, you need to sit comfortably and somewhere that is just clear that you can look at that information. One thing about our industry, it's very figure orientated, and figures do not lie. And if you have got a situation where perhaps your rents are really low at the moment, but you may well have a tenant who's been with you for ages, you're going to have to really try and think about addressing that this side of the act. And there's many other things, but I would suggest that's what you need to do. What may well be good for one landlord isn't necessarily good for another. I'm personally doing a lot of refinancing within my portfolio because, you know, believe it or not, I'm going to be a sexagenarian this year, and, you know, I'm not planning on selling. I want to be able to keep them, but the numbers have got to tally.
So it's really just knowing your own terrain and having your, I know it's a cliche, your ducks in a row,
Absolutely.
your figures right. So there's no nasty surprises then coming at you.
No, because if you don't do that and you don't know where you are, the nasty surprises are going to come. If you're not compliant, you can't see what properties you're compliant in and not to others. You can't see your figures. You can't see when a mortgage is going to be redeemed. How can you start? And you need to get those basics into place now, because it may well be that you need to speak to a financial advisor or broker. There's all sorts of things that will come from that, and I think that's what you need to do. with regards to her question about sort of, you know, she self-manages and she obviously has others that are rented out, presumably through agents, I think it's a case that anyone who is self-managing, you're going to have to look at things. Do I really have the time to do this? There's going to be a lot more detail. You know, there's civil penalties, as you know, 7,000 first offence, 40,000 the second offence. There's going to be lots of things, and you really have to say to yourself, can I do this? Because it's not going to be worth getting a £7,000 fine if you pay an agency whatever the X is.
So just give us an idea, what might you have done wrong to get a £7,000 fine?
Well, look, for example, there's going to be the landlord's database. If you don't put your details down on that, that could basically be a £7,000 fine. And every landlord and agent will need to have those details. It's a pretty
substantial fine, isn't it? It's a sort of...
It's
There's loads of areas of really bad criminality where you don't get fined £7,000.
So it's harsh.
Yeah.
7,000 first, 40,000 second. You can't afford to do that, and that money is
14,000.
Sorry, 40,000.
40 for the second. Right, okay.
40 for the second. So what I'm saying is that you can't afford to get into that sort of situation.
Sure.
So my first thing would be to anyone, any landlord, whether you've got 2 properties, 1, several, you know, it doesn't matter. Get that information across the spreadsheet, look at it. Perhaps if you've got somebody else to look at it, because there are so many things that you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's another one. I have a buy-to-let that is currently empty. I'm trying to find a new agency to work with. I've just evicted one tenant for rent arrears and need to know I am working with the right agency. What should I be looking for?
Okay, good question.
That is a massive minefield, isn't it, for people? There's a lot of people who will offer to take care of things and manage and rent it out for you, but picking the right one.
I think you can't just look at money by itself. You can't compare an agent to another just purely on the fee that they're going to charge. So I think there really has to be a case that you need to be able to get to know your agent before and to ask them some questions. How are they preparing? Because from an agency perspective, the fee structure, number one, is going to change. You can't any longer charge a landlord a letting fee on a term. There isn't going to be a term. So you need to be able to see what is that agent doing to prepare themselves. You need to be able to speak to some of their clients, okay? The current clients. You know, if somebody called me and said, oh, look, I want to speak to 2 or 3 of your clients, I could give them these numbers. I wouldn't need to make calls to those clients because they will say what is really happening.
Sure.
And so I think, you know, it's not just a case of looking on what you can see on the surface, it's about how they're going to deal with it. I was at an event last week, and it's going to remain nameless, but it was an event for letting and managing agents. So they were talking about the Renters' Rights Bill. And after the end, there was Q&A. And one of the agents said, how am I going to be able to do renewals to get renewal fees? And I really had to turn around, Ian, because I wanted to see who is this agent that is saying this? I mean, do you understand the bit in the middle that's missing? So you look great and you've got the lovely marketing going out and your social media is sky high, but you haven't really got the knowledge. So I think landlords are going to need to be able to make sure that they see 3 agents and pick and ask those questions.
There's a protection almost, isn't there, in having, you know, that knowledge around you.
You've got to, because at the end of the day,
a second view, if nothing else.
You've got to, and referencing and all of that stuff.
Here's another one, Marie. I'm thinking of selling my property in the next 2 years. Do you think this is wise?
You've got to be careful that if you are saying that I'm going to evict a tenant when this law comes into place, and you evict the tenant for whatever reason and you go through that process, and then you decide that you're going to sell that property, for example, and your sale, for whatever reason, falls through, right? So the tenants have gone, you've basically got possession, you're going to sell that property for the rest of its time, But 3-4 months into that, the deal falls through for whatever reason. You as a landlord cannot rent that property until 8 months' time down the line. Do you get that?
You're not allowed to rent
You're
it.
not allowed to rent it.
So that there's a bar on you renting it.
You can't. You evicted the tenants because you evicted the tenants.
Yeah.
So you decided to elect that I'm going to sell this property.
Yeah.
Your sale falls through for whatever reason.
You still can't.
You can't re-rent that property for the remaining year.
Wow. Couple more questions on this, Marie. Just swift answers if we can. As a landlord and an agent, what is Marie's biggest concern with regards to this act? You've just named a big one there.
I think as a landlord, if I'm being honest, it's about the database, what information exactly is going to be on there, who can access that, because I think that can open up people to fraud. So I would definitely say to anyone, make sure you get your property alerts done at Land Registry on your property, especially if you've got unencumbered properties. I think that's important. As an agent, it's just more regulation. It's a lot more dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and it really is a case of how far. And that puts a lot of pressure already on a staff load that is already to it.
And final one, what do you think is a landlord's biggest threat to this Renters' Rights Bill? Which is a kind of similar point to the last one.
But if I'm being honest, I think the biggest threat is if you don't do the referencing properly. Because you have really got to know who's coming in, can't be on just a gut vibe. And affordability is one of the things. You know that I don't believe in multiples in terms of how a lot of people assess a tenant on multiples. So if the property is 1,000, they times it by 36. If you've got a 36k income, they give it a green tick. But you and I know we can be on the same salary level, but you have much more surplus income than I do, and it doesn't give us the same tick just because we're on the same salary. And lots of other things beside.
I tell you what, this subject isn't going away even when it's up and running, of course. It's going to be discussed the 19th of March, the Landlord Investment Show, Old Billingsgate. You're going to be there again.
I am.
You're kind of part of the furniture there, whether it's the morning debates, the afternoon ones.
I've been with Liz from the beginning, I think.
The very start of
the very first show. It's their 90th show, isn't it?
The 90th, yeah. What about that?
Yeah,
Listen,
amazing.
we look forward to seeing you there.
Indeed.
Thank you very much, Marie.
Thank you.
That is it from us, though, and it's back to Tracey.
Thank you so much, Ian, and thank you guys for tuning in. That was an extremely insightful episode, and again, thank you for sending all of your questions in. We have been totally overwhelmed, and it's great to be able to put those questions to our subscribers, to experts that are really on top of their game. And I think sort of a couple of takeaways there for me, certainly. From Marie's point of view, you know, just make sure that you look at everything and make sure it stacks up, make sure that you are prepared, make sure that you're working with the right people. I think Suzanne's was extremely positive. You know, there is definitely ways that you will navigate through this, and you know, she said she is not selling up. So I hope that that has given you guys some hope, and I look forward to the next edition of UK Property News, and we'll bring that to you very, very soon. We will see you, a lot of you, on the 19th of March at Old Billingsgate at our National Landlord Investment Show. If you haven't got your tickets, please do so via our website, which is all the W's, landlordinvestmentshow.co.uk. There is so much happening on that day, over 50 seminars. We have got 2 huge panel debates, part 1 in the morning, part 2 in the afternoon. So get your tickets if you haven't already, and we look forward to seeing you at the show on the 19th, and we look forward to you tuning in for the next episode of UK Property News.